There you go. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Have you ever eaten Mutter Palau? It's a spicy Pakistani rice dish. I'm in the International Cafe at the Holiday Folk Fair International in Milwaukee. People from 35 different ethnic groups are serving food here. The Holiday Folk Fair International is a festival celebrating Wisconsin's rich ethnic heritage. I'm having a great time, but it makes me wonder, why did so many different groups of people come to Wisconsin? Let's investigate. At Holiday Folk Fair International, it seems that throughout Wisconsin's history, people have moved here from many different countries. Have you ever moved to a new place to live? Why do you think people move?
I think people move for a better environment.
People move because they want to explore.
I think people move because of the weather.
I think people move because they want a better life. People move because they have to. Some people move for religious reasons.
It sounds like everyone has their own answer. People move for lots of different reasons. Some people are pushed from the place they used to live if they lose a job, for example, and have to move to find another one. And some people are pulled to a new place, such as those who want to be closer to their family. As we investigate today, I'd like to discover some of the things in the past that pushed people from their original place and pulled them to Wisconsin. I found a great map at the Folk Fair. The cultural map of Wisconsin identifies hundreds of places where we can learn about our state's cultural heritage. We know that Menominee and Ho-Chunk people were among the first living here, followed by the fur traders. By the 1820s, lead miners were here. But this map says the Oneida people arrived about the same time. We can learn more about their history at the Oneida Nation Museum near Green Bay. Let's go. Ms. Karen Brockman, director of the Oneida Nation Museum, told me the first Oneidas came to Wisconsin in 1822 from their homeland in New York State. They brought their traditions and culture with them. So what would this be used for? It looks like a musical instrument.
Yes, it is. It's a rattle. Actually, you can try that out. Okay. And there's another one right here. Can you guess what this part right here is made of?
Probably the bone of some animal.
Close. That's a really good guess. It's made out of the horn from a cow. And these are used for social dancing and just, social gatherings, sometimes in ceremonies too.
Okay. Ms. Brockman told me there were many pressures on the Oneida people which pushed them to move. The land companies, New York State leaders, and the U.S. government wanted the Oneida lands in New York for settlers. In 1821, the Oneida made an agreement with the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations to obtain some land. Some people from other American Indian nations moved to the Wisconsin Territory in the 1800s too, such as the Stockbridge Munsee and the Brothertons. So, in the 1800s, some Indians were pushed from the east by white settlers, land companies, and state and federal governments. They started new homes here. Some were pushed further west by the United States removal policy, and some moved to reservations. New white settlers purchased their lands. But who were these new settlers, and where did they come from? If you've ever driven through Wisconsin, you've probably seen lots of interesting towns. Sometimes their names have a lot to do with where the first settlers were from. I wonder if people who moved to Wisconsin were trying to create a new home that reminded them of what they had left behind. This is New Glarus. It's in southwest Wisconsin, although it almost makes me feel like I'm in Europe. It said here that New Glarus was a planned community, founded in 1845 by about 75 Swiss families who were pushed from poverty and crowded conditions in Switzerland and pulled to Wisconsin because of available farmland. They were immigrants, which means they moved here from somewhere else. Other people from Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and many other European countries immigrated to Wisconsin for similar reasons. In the 1800s, many places in Europe were already getting crowded. A tradition there called primogeniture allowed only the oldest son in a family to inherit any land. So thousands of people decided to immigrate to Wisconsin. They faced a long and difficult voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, then traveled to Wisconsin on the Erie Canal and Great Lakes. They knew they would probably never see their family and friends in the old country again, and they didn't know what they would find in their new home. Those people had difficult decisions to make. Can you imagine how hard it would be to leave behind your family and friends and everything familiar? Areas in the Northeast United States were also getting crowded. Land shortages and money problems pushed people away from their homes. Thousands of the Europeans and Yankees from the eastern and southern United States settled in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's territorial leaders wanted enough white people here so they could apply for statehood, and they worked hard to recruit immigrants. In time, many new immigrants arrived. Most bought land to farm. They created more conflicts with the Wisconsin Indians, but also brought new knowledge and skills. Although people came from many countries, the biggest number came from Germany. Most of those immigrants were pushed from their old homes by poverty and land shortages, although some were also escaping wars or looking for religious or political freedom. They were pulled to Wisconsin by cheap, available land, by opportunities for work, and by the freedom to live with their political and religious beliefs. I've been reading about another group of immigrants who came during that period, African Americans. We know a few black people who lived here during the fur trade and territorial periods. I found some information about a place called the Milton House Historic Site, where we can investigate some of the later arrivals. It's an old stagecoach inn located in Rock County. But in the 1840s and 50s, not all of the travelers arrived by stagecoach. Here we are at the Milton House Historic Site. I'm here with Dr. Zachary Cooper, a historian who's an expert on African American history. Hello, Dr. Cooper. We're investigating immigration today. What can you tell us about early immigration of African Americans in the 1800s?
Well, the Milton House was a very important place for African Americans. The Underground Railroad, especially the Milton House, was one of the many places on the Underground route, and the Underground Railroad was a system of secret hideaways where black people could receive lodging and hide away from the slave catchers who were trying to return them to slavery.
The director of the Milton House told me that historians don't really know how many people traveled on the Underground Railroad because most of them left no clues behind. But here's how one runaway slave felt while traveling on the Underground Railroad.
It was a clear, starlit night. Once inside, I felt so happy, in spite of my fear, that I felt like I was dreaming. At last, I became alive to the truth, that I was in a friend's house, that I was really safe.
Those were scary times. People were pushed from slavery and pulled towards the promise of freedom in the North. Others came as free women and men, especially after the Civil War. The early black settlers joined the Wisconsin American Indians, Yankees, and Europeans already living here. So many people arrived that by 1870, Wisconsin had a population of 1 million people. Most of those people settled in rural areas. But at the folk fair, I met the ancestors of many immigrants who never lived on farms. Do you know why immigrants began moving to our cities? For many years, skilled craftsmen made the goods that people needed. But by the 1870s, something called the Industrial Revolution was changing the way people worked. New machines were doing more and more of the work, and factory owners needed unskilled workers to keep the machines running. Most of those workers were new arrivals who had been pushed from countries in southern and eastern Europe, like Italy and Czechoslovakia, because jobs there were hard to find. they were pulled to Wisconsin cities by new factory jobs. From the 1890s until about 1920, thousands of immigrants crowded into cities like Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha. Although the workers did many important jobs, some of the people already living in Wisconsin didn't like having so many poor people arrive. They passed laws that made life harder for the new immigrants. In addition to the Southern and Eastern Europeans, some black people were pulled to Wisconsin's factory jobs too. They were pushed by racism and limited opportunities in southern states. In the 1930s and 1940s, more black people in the South lost their jobs when machines began to take over their work. But immigration didn't stop there. Here at Holiday Folk Fair International, some of the groups represented arrived in the last 50 years. These story cloths were made by Hmong people, who are some of Wisconsin's most recent arrivals. The women have stitched clues about the things that pushed them from their old homes in Laos. The Hmong were pushed from Laos as a result of war. They became refugees, which means they had to escape a dangerous situation and find a safe place to live. Other recent arrivals from countries like Pakistan, Mexico, China, and Jamaica have come to Wisconsin for different reasons. Well, we've discovered why there are so many different groups of people represented here at Holiday Folk Fair International. People have moved here from near and far. Immigrating to a new country is a huge change. Over the years, many new immigrants had a difficult time adjusting to their new lives. And sometimes, the people already here had a hard time adjusting to the new immigrants. But the arrival of immigrants from so many different places has helped make Wisconsin such an interesting state. I'm glad Wisconsin people today celebrate our ethnic diversity at festivals like this. Do you have any ethnic festivals in your area?
There's an Oktoberfest in La Crosse. There are many powwows throughout Wisconsin.
A lot of people celebrate Kwanzaa. We celebrate the Hmong New Year.
There's a Poker Fest in Pulaski.
I'm going to a Mardi Gras festival tonight.
Bayfest in Green Bay is a celebration of many cultures.
Maybe you can visit an ethnic festival to learn more about Wisconsin's varied cultural heritage. Perhaps you can get to know someone who recently moved to Wisconsin and help them feel at home. Or maybe you can look for clues about the first immigrants in your community. See you next time.